25 disturbing movie accidents, 7 levels. Brace yourself for a spine-chilling look at some of the most shocking accidents to ever occur on film sets. It starts off with tense close calls, but the deeper into the iceberg we get, the more tragic they become. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Natalie Portman's on-set injury during Black Swan. In the 2010 dark thriller Black Swan, popular Hollywood actress Natalie Portman played the role of a professional New York ballerina called Nina. During the filming of a ballet scene where Natalie was being lifted, she dislocated a rib. In pain, she did what anyone would. She asked the producer to get a medic. That's when Natalie learned that the movie was so low budget that there was no medic on standby. She had to personally request medical supplies to manage the pain. Even then, filming did not stop. Instead, they changed routines and would lift her by carrying her under her arm just so they could continue. All the while, Natalie was in terrible pain, but she bore through it in true ballerina fashion. Turned out that behind the twirls and floaty tula skirts, ballet dancers were known to suffer extreme injuries and just keep dancing through it. In some way, Natalie was portraying her character to a T. It was something she had learned a year before filming started. During that time, she had been training to prepare for the part under Mary Helen Bowers, a former ballerina with the New York City Ballet. It was an intense training regimen that included ballet, swimming, toning, and core strengthening exercises, and could take as long as 8 hours a day. Natalie also went on a crazy diet of carrots and almonds to lose 20 pounds so she could portray the lithe, frail ballerina look. Were the sacrifices worth it? Well, the movie was a huge success, and Natalie Portman went on to win several acting awards for her role as Nina. Many have described it as a defining moment in her career. Would she do it all again? That's a totally different question. Flames and Fear, the 1972 fire on The Exorcist set. When the movie The Exorcist was getting ready to be filmed in the early 1970s, something strange happened. A bird flew into a circuit box on the $130,000 set of the movie built at Sesco Studios in New York. This seemingly harmless incident led to a fire that destroyed the carefully constructed interior of the McNeil family home. All except for Reagan's bedroom, the one room which just happened to be the central location for many of the movie's terrifying scenes of demonic possession. The cast and crew on the set began to speculate that it was a bad omen of what was to come. They weren't wrong. During the filming, actress Ellen Burstyn and Linda Blair both suffered back injuries while performing stunts on set. While rehearsing the scene where she levitates, Blair was in a harness when she fractured her back and was screaming in pain, but everyone on set thought she was acting her heart out. The mishaps continued even off the set. The son of Jason Miller, who played the part of Father Karras, had a near-fatal motorcycle accident during filming. Members of the crew weren't left out. One crew member lost his toe while a carpenter chopped off his thumb. They got off easy. At least 9 people linked to the film died during production. Linda's grandfather, the assistant cameraman's kid, the man who refrigerated the set, and the janitor who took care of the building. Jack McGowan, who played the part of an eccentric film director, and Vasiliki Malairos, who played Father Karras' mother, both died before the film was even released. Things got so bad that director William Friedkin called on Father Thomas Birmingham, a Jesuit priest and Georgetown professor, to bless the set. By then, there were whispers of The Exorcist's curse. When the film was released in 1973, the stories of the curse only got worse, especially when it was reported that a bolt of lightning struck a church opposite a cinema screening the film in Rome. Some believe the rumors of a curse were spread by Warner Brothers to get more people talking about the movie. Level 2. Tony Jaa's brutal injuries on the set of Ong Bak. For more than a decade, Tachkorn Yirum, better known internationally as Tony Jaa, used his skills as a Thai martial artist to play the part of a stunt double. Then he decided to step into the limelight. In 2003, he played his first lead role in his first martial arts film, Ong Bak. It was a film that got Tony compared to other popular actors in the martial arts world like Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and Jet Li. That's because, like them, Tony delivered real martial arts sequences without using computer-generated effects, wires, or even stunt doubles. The scenes where he leaps over moving cars and jumps right through hoops of barbed wire are as real as they come. But Tony's dedication to delivering authentic martial arts scenes came at a cost. In a scene where he was fighting at a gas station with his pants on fire, Tony's pants were on fire, literally. The flames even spread upwards and would burn his eyebrows, eyelashes, and even his armpit hairs. Yet, Tony powered through and even went on to do a few more takes till the stunt was perfect. This wasn't the only injury he suffered during the filming of Ong Bak. Tony had gotten a sprained ankle and multiple ligament injuries while performing his stunts. Tony's commitment to his martial arts stunt work paid off and won him international recognition. From then, his acting career took off and he went on to feature in many notable films where he still gets injured on set. Bruce Willis's hearing loss on the set of Die Hard. In the 1988 action thriller Die Hard, Bruce Willis took on the role of John McClane, a wisecracking, know-it-all cop who stumbled into a hostage situation. It was a movie that took Bruce Willis from making cringy commercials to becoming one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood. But that move came at a huge personal cost to the actor. It's said that during the filming of the movie, director John McTiernan wanted the gunfire scenes to sound more realistic. So he got blanks that were extra loud for the prop guns to boost the cinematic effect he wanted. Doesn't sound like something that would hurt anyone, but it did. In an interview, Willis revealed that he had lost 2/3 of his hearing in his left ear after an accident on the first Die Hard. He didn't go into details, but one of his daughters did. She explained that while filming a scene where Bruce Willis was pinned under a table, the extra loud prop guns were fired right next to his ear. The dangerous mix of a painfully loud sound and a closed space led to Bruce Willis rupturing a part of his eardrum and left him with a lifelong injury. For years, he struggled to hear interviews and conversations. Many misread his unresponsiveness as arrogance, but worse was coming. 3 decades after the first Die Hard, Bruce Willis is a star icon and household name, but the effects of his hearing loss remain. In 2022, his family announced that he had been diagnosed with dementia and would be retiring from acting. They believed that it was yet another repercussion of the shooting scene. Just another reminder of the huge cost that he paid for entertainment. You know what won't cost you a thing? Hitting that subscribe button and giving this video a thumbs up. Let's continue. Level 3. Finger injuries on the set of Highlander 2. In the second installment in the Highlander film series, The Quickening, actors Christopher Lambert and Michael Ironside had a couple of sword fight scenes. Both actors insisted on using real steel swords so the scenes would be more realistic and add to the intensity of the fights. But the two might have underestimated just how intense it would get. Lambert was the first on the plate after accidentally slicing his own finger down to the bone with the 22-pound sword. The result was 12 stitches and a lot of pain, but Lambert powered through it and hurried right back to the set to continue filming despite the pain he was in. But there was still a bit more pain lined up for him. Not long after, both Christopher Lambert and Michael Ironside had their fight scene with the real swords. It didn't go well. Ironside got a chipped tooth and Lambert had a part of his finger chopped off. That was all it took for production to take away the heavy steel swords and switch them for plastic props. That wasn't the end of this chaos on the set of Highlander 2. During a duel on set, Ironside's jaw got dislocated. Shockingly, he told Lambert to punch the jaw back into place, and Lambert complied, realigning the jaw right on the spot. All this trouble might have been worth it if there hadn't been more trouble headed their way. The movie was filmed in Argentina, and just as shooting began, the economy collapsed and prices shot up overnight. The film's investors, concerned about the film not being finished before it ran out of money, began to take over the production and rewrite parts of the film. The result was disastrous, and many consider Highlander 2 to be one of the worst films that have ever been made. I personally love it, but that's because I consider it one of the funniest films ever made.
Right, I understand that. But I do beg to differ.
But only if you can find the original theatrical release, which I have. Buster Keaton's near-disastrous injury during Steamboat Bill Jr. stunt. In the early 1900s, long before Jackie Chan and Tom Cruise got famous doing their stunts, there was Buster Keaton. He was an American actor, comedian, and filmmaker known for his silent films where he performed physical comedy and came up with the most inventive stunts for laughs. The most memorable stunt of his career was captured in his 1928 film, Steamboat Bill Jr. In the iconic life-threatening scene, Keaton had to stand perfectly still as the facade of the two-story building fell around him. The only thing that kept him from getting crushed under the 2-ton structure was a perfectly placed open window in the attic. According to legend, Keaton's shoes were nailed down to the spot he needed to stand, but some crew members were so convinced that something would go wrong that they walked off the set before the scene. As luck would have it, the stunt went off without a hitch, but that wasn't always the case. In a scene from his 1924 film Sherlock Jr., Keaton ran on top of a moving train. He planned to grab a rope at the end and swing to the ground as a water spout opened on him. But the force of the water was so much that Keaton was knocked down to the train tracks and slammed his neck on a steel rail. He blacked out for a few seconds before finishing the scene. After that, Keaton began to experience severe headaches but ignored the pain and continued working. It was after this that he came up with the iconic Steamboat Bill Jr. scene. 10 years passed before he went for a physical examination, and a doctor discovered that he had broken his neck during that sequence. While not all of Keaton's efforts paid off, the famous falling house stunt has remained and has since been recreated several times in many films and television shows. Michael J. Fox's near-fatal hanging stunt on Back to the Future 3. In a wild behind-the-scenes moment from the 1990 movie Back to the Future 3, Michael J. Fox found himself in a life-or-death situation during a stunt that almost went horribly wrong. The film featured a tense scene where Marty McFly, played by Fox, is about to be hanged. In the wide shots, a stuntman was used, but Fox had to be involved in the close-up shots. Initially, the plan was pretty safe. Fox stood on a box with a noose around his neck, allowing him to wiggle his feet and create the illusion of hanging. But the scene just didn't look realistic enough. So Fox, always up for a challenge, decided to ditch the box and hang from the rope directly. The plan was to position his hands between the rope and his neck and have it act like a buffer. It was a bold but risky move, but it worked fine on the first 2 takes. During the 3rd take, things took a turn when Fox miscalculated how to position his hands. Suddenly, the noose tightened around his neck and he started to pass out. For several terrifying seconds, he hung there swinging and unconscious. Meanwhile, the film crew thought Fox was just giving his best for the shot. It was director Robert Zemeckis who finally noticed something was off about Fox's limp body and unresponsive face. Quick on his feet, Zemeckis shouted for help and crew members rushed in to cut him down just in time. Despite the trauma, Fox returned to set and completed the film. While he didn't suffer any serious brain injuries, a year later he began to notice involuntary muscle twitches. That's when 29-year-old Fox was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He kept it quiet for years and continued to work before revealing it in 1998. In his first memoir, Lucky Man, Fox opened up about how this near-death experience shook him up and made him wonder if it had anything to do with his diagnosis. However, there is no scientific proof to back that up. The stunt that nearly killed Jackie Chan. For many years, actor Jackie Chan has been performing his stunts and doing daredevil feats in martial arts and action comedy films. Over time, he's racked up dozens and dozens of injuries, such as when he broke his back and dislocated his pelvis after he crashed through a glass ceiling while filming Police Story, or when he got slashed during a sword fighting scene in the 1978 movie Snake in Eagle's Shadow. But Chan didn't stop. He kept fighting, and the shot, complete with Chan's blood, made it to the final cut. Then there was the time Chan injured his neck after falling from a tower in the movie Project A. And who can forget when he almost lost an eye while filming the 1978 movie Drunken Master? But there is one stunt that almost ended the life of the acting veteran in his heyday. It was during the filming of the 1986 film Armor of God. Chan had just finished filming a beer drinking sequence where he opened a can and drank real beer, as was common in the time. In the next scene, his character would jump from a ledge to the branch of a tree. He got the first take all right, but ever the perfectionist, Chan was not satisfied and decided to go for a second take. After taking more beer, Chan made it to the ledge and again jumped for the branch. In some versions, he missed the branch. In other versions, the branch broke. Either way, Chan fell 40 feet head first onto the rocky ground below. The fall broke Chan's nose, shattered his jaw, and fractured his skull. He had to be rushed to the hospital for life-saving 8-hour brain surgery. The stunt left Chan with a permanent hole in his skull, but he did not let that stop him and went right back to doing bonkers stunts as if nothing ever happened. Level 4. The crash behind the camera. Uma Thurman's Kill Bill on-set accident. Towards the end of the movie Kill Bill, the bride, played by Uma Thurman, is in a vintage convertible speeding down a dirt road in Mexico. But during filming, it was that one scene that Thurman wanted no part in. A crew member had told her that though the car had been converted from a stick shift to an automatic, it wasn't safe to drive and the seats weren't screwed in right. Thurman wanted a stunt driver to take her part in the scene, but director Quentin Tarantino wasn't having it. He assured Thurman that the car was fine and the road was straight. What could possibly go wrong? Well, seconds after Thurman got behind the wheel, she lost control of the car and crashed into a tree, her body thrown violently to the side. Crew members rushed to the wreck to check on her before carrying her out. Thurman suffered a concussion, permanent damage to her neck, screwed up knees, and long-term chronic pain. When she was released from the hospital, she accused Tarantino of trying to kill her, and the two fell out when he refused to hand over the footage of the crash. It was 15 years before Thurman finally got the recording of that crash and released it on Instagram, but she didn't hold Tarantino responsible. Instead, she blamed the movie's producer, Lawrence Bender, and the notorious Harvey Weinstein for covering it up. The Joe Watts stunt fall on Fast and Furious 9. A job as a stunt performer usually calls for trained professionals who can safely perform actions that appear to be dangerous, risky, or even deadly. But even with all that training, mistakes can happen outside their control and end their careers in the blink of an eye. That was the case for stunt performer Joe Watts. On July 22, 2019, Watts was on a balcony at the Warner Brothers studio in Hertfordshire, UK. He was in a fight scene for the epic car chases and death-defying movie Fast and the Furious 9, where he was playing Vin Diesel's double. In the scene, Watts was supposed to be thrown over another performer's right shoulder, and that was what had been rehearsed. But during filming, the stunt was changed, and Watts would be thrown over the left shoulder. However, the wiring and crash mats weren't adjusted for that change. Like that wasn't bad enough, the safety line on Watts' stunt vest became detached. So when Watts was thrown over the other performer's left shoulder, he fell 25 feet onto concrete, head first, breaking his skull. The makers of Fast and Furious were hit with an 800,000-pound fine, but Watts suffered the most from their mistake. He got a skull fracture and a severe traumatic brain injury, which resulted in permanent impairment and disability. Watts would later file a $1.2 million lawsuit against the producers, but his life would never go back to what it was. The career Watts had built working on popular films and productions such as Wonder Woman 1984, Spider-Man Far From Home, Solo, A Star Wars Story, and Phantom Thread had come to a dramatic end. Christopher Reeve's life-altering injury on the Summersby set. Christopher Reeve was an American actor best known as the star of 4 Superman movies between 1978 and 1987. It was a role that made him so popular that Reeve began taking on independent films and turning down roles in big-budget movies. But it all came crashing down on May 27, 1995, after a life-altering accident. Many stories claim that it happened on the set of the 1993 film Summersby. That wasn't the case. Reeve was an experienced horse rider, and he was at an equestrian event in Culpeper, Virginia, riding his horse, Eastern Express. Despite his bond with the horse, the unexpected happened. Just before a routine jump, Eastern Express suddenly stopped. Reeve was thrown forward with his hands caught in the reins and crashed headfirst into a fence. In an instant, his first and second cervical vertebrae were shattered, severely damaging his spinal cord. Reeve was airlifted to the University of Virginia Hospital, where doctors reattached his skull to his spinal column. They were able to save his life, but Reeve would never again regain movement below his neck. Determined to regain control of his life, Reeve threw himself into rehabilitation and became an advocate for spinal cord injury research. He established the Christopher Reeve Foundation, which became a leading organization for advancing medical research in paralysis. He also directed In the Gloaming, a 1997 drama that got 5 Emmy nominations. Then, Reeve shocked everyone when he made 2 guest appearances in the Superman-themed television series Smallville. Reeve lived another 10 years after the accident till he died of heart failure in 2004. His journey from a celebrated actor to a passionate advocate continues to inspire many. Harrison Ford's near-fatal stunt. In 2024, after a lifetime of awards and accolades, Harrison Ford, the blockbuster actor known best as Indiana Jones and Han Solo, was honored as a Disney legend. But his time in the spotlight was almost cut short during the filming of the 1981 film Raiders of the Lost Ark. In the scene, Ford was performing his own stunt as he fought a mechanic under a real vintage airplane. He was supposed to roll out of the way of the plane's wheel, but mistimed the movement and got run over by the landing gear. Ford's left leg was pinned under the plane's large wheel just inches away from his knee. It took 40 crew members to rock the plane off his leg, and Ford was left nursing a torn ligament. Another time, while filming another of the movies in the Indiana Jones franchise, Ford ruptured 2 of the discs in his spine while riding elephants. The actor was put out of commission for 5 long weeks, and director Steven Spielberg was forced to use a double and film him from behind so the audience wouldn't catch on. In the movie The Fugitive, the character Ford played began walking with a limp after running through the woods. But what seemed like continuity was a very real injury that Ford had suffered. In a scene where he escapes from a bus and runs through a dark forest, Ford damaged the ligaments in his leg again. So as not to slow down filming, Ford refused to get surgery and continued the rest of the movie with a painful limp. While filming Star Wars: The Force Awakens in 2014, Ford couldn't walk off the injury he got on set. He was passing through an automatic hydraulic door on the set, and the doors suddenly jammed, almost crushing him. Ford was left with a broken leg, a lacerated hand, and a dislocated ankle. He was lucky, a few inches, and he would easily have been killed. While all these accidents happened on set, Ford's life was just as dramatic off-screen. One of his passions is flying, and it is a hobby that has brought him close to death's door several times. Back in 1999, Ford was practicing landings in his helicopter with his instructor when the engine lost power and crash-landed. Remarkably, both Ford and the instructor walked away uninjured. Then there was the famous crash of 2015, where Ford suffered a broken pelvis and head injuries after the engine of his plane failed while he was 3,000 feet in the air. In true action hero style, Ford avoided crashing into any homes or buildings. Instead, he maneuvered the plane to a golf course and crash-landed there. True to the character he plays, Ford has also been a hero in real life. In 2000, he joined a rescue operation to find a hiker who had become stranded in the mountains of Idaho. Then in 2001, he rescued a 13-year-old boy who had gotten lost in Yellowstone National Park. This is one case where truth is stranger than fiction. Dar Robinson, tragic death during high-fall stunt on Million Dollar Mystery. One of the most celebrated stunt professionals in Hollywood in the 1970s and 80s was Christopher Dar Allen Robinson. He was a pioneer in the world of stunts. He jumped out of helicopters without a parachute, drove over cliffs, leapt from tall buildings, and set plenty of world records doing it, like the highest high fall while on fire and the longest car jump from ramp to surface. Robinson was a constant face on action film sets, working alongside popular actors like Steve McQueen, Burt Reynolds, and Clint Eastwood. At the peak of his career, Robinson was listed as the highest-paid stuntman after he got paid $100,000 to jump from an 1,100-foot-high tower in the movie High Point. He did the jump once with a parachute and another time with a cable system he'd invented. Despite the level of stunts he did, Robinson was never described as a daredevil. He was always meticulous and planned his stunts to a T. Astonishingly, over a 13-year career, Robinson had never broken a single bone. But that changed on November 21st, 1986. Robinson was on the set of the film Million Dollar Mystery at Glen Canyon in the Arizona desert. He had just completed a high-profile stunt where he would crash his motorcycle into a guardrail and jump into a safety net. The next shoot was going to be a lot tamer by comparison. 3 gangsters pursuing the hero, something that Robinson could do in his sleep. So the emergency medical staff were dismissed from the set. Robinson and 2 other cyclists were playing the part of the gangsters and sped down a steep hill. There was a sharp curve ahead and they slowed down to make the turn, but something went terribly wrong and Robinson, who was on the outside edge, lost control of the dirt bike and slipped off the road and over the embankment, plummeting 40 feet to his death. And so, Dar Robinson's one failed stunt became his last. Level 5. Margaret Hamilton's fiery on-set accident during The Wizard of Oz. The 1939 musical comedy The Wizard of Oz has since locked its place as one of the most iconic films ever made. But very few of the movie's fans know what it would cost one of the film's actresses, in particular, Margaret Hamilton, who played the part of the iconic Wicked Witch of the West. In the scene where the witch appears in a cloud of red smoke, an elevator platform was built into the floor to lower her from the set just before the crew would start a fire through nearby vents. Real fire. This was the 1930s, after all. There was no CGI. But somehow, they managed to get the scene in the first take. Hamilton said her line, got on the elevator, the smoke was released, she was dropped through the floor, and cleared off as the fire was set. Everyone, cast and crew, was happy, but the director, Victor Fleming, wanted another take. But mistakes kept happening. They were on the 5th take when it happened. Hamilton was still above the set when the technicians released the fire through the vent. The crew rushed to help her out, but they weren't fast enough, and the result was catastrophic. Hamilton suffered 2nd-degree burns on her face and 3rd-degree burns on her hands. It got worse. The green makeup she wore on her face and hands was copper-based and toxic if absorbed, so the crew had to hurriedly clean it off with rubbing alcohol before the copper damaged her skin. It was a pain that Hamilton would never forget. Hamilton recuperated for 6 weeks and returned to finish filming the role with her hand still healing. That's when the studio insisted she film a skywriting scene. But the minute they told her she would be put in a fireproof costume, Hamilton refused. She was done with fires. So they turned to her stunt double, Betty Danko. But during rehearsals, things went sideways when a pipe designed to produce smoke exploded, tearing off her hat and wig and tossing her off the broomstick. Danko suffered a 2-inch deep burn on her leg, chemical burns, and could not walk for a while. It's one of the rare cases where an actress and her stunt double were out of commission, and that it happened on the set of a whimsical fantasy children's film made it that much more shocking. Conway Wycliffe's fatal accident on the Dark Knight set. There are two names mentioned in the closing credits of the Batman movie, The Dark Knight: Heath Ledger and Conway Wycliffe. The two had passed on before the movie hit cinemas. Ledger, who played Joker in the movie, had died from an accidental overdose. Wycliffe's death had also been an accident, but it happened right on set. Wycliffe was a special effects technician and crane operator who had worked on several blockbusters, including Batman Begins and the James Bond film Casino Royale. On September 24, 2007, he was on the set of Batman: The Dark Knight with the rest of the crew. They planned to film the second part of an action scene that involved the Batmobile getting launched from a ramp and flipped over before exploding. Wycliffe, who doubled as a second-unit camera operator, was going to travel alongside the stunt car in the backseat of a four-wheel Nissan. He would lean out the back window while holding a camera to capture the scene. They did 3 rehearsal runs, and it went without a hitch. But the 4th time, the Nissan failed to go around a bend and ran into a tree. Wycliffe, who had been leaning out of one of the car's back windows without his seatbelt on, didn't stand a chance. He suffered severe head injuries and died before they could get him to the hospital. There was a 2-day inquisition into his death in 2008, but in the end, his death was ruled an accident. Paul Mance, the fatal crash during the Flight of the Phoenix. The Flight of the Phoenix was a 1965 survival drama that followed the gripping tale of a group of plane crash survivors who had been stranded in the Sahara Desert. To escape, they worked together to build a new aircraft from the wreckage, a plane named Tallman's Phoenix P-1. There was no question of who would be the stunt pilots for the Phoenix during filming: Paul Mance. Mance had made a name for himself both in air races and as a famous Hollywood stunt pilot. He and his partner, Frank Tallman, assembled the unique aircraft from the parts of several planes to give the effect of a plane built from scratch, just like the movie storyline. Again, this was the pre-CGI era, so the plane was also expected to fly. Mance did the majority of the trial flights, while Tallman was the one who flew the plane for its aerial shots on July 7, 1965 in the Arizona desert. The next day, the director wanted some low-level shots that would simulate a touch-and-go desert takeoff, but Tallman was nowhere to be found. He had seriously injured his leg while go-karting with his son and was in the hospital. So Mance covered for his friend and took the air with stuntman Bobby Rose. The first take went fine, but during the second take, the aircraft lost control. Some witnesses reported that the plane went into a steep climb before suddenly nosediving into the desert. The results were devastating. The plane snapped in two. 61-year-old Mance died on the spot while the second stuntman, Bobby Rose, was thrown out of the plane. Miraculously, he survived but broke his pelvis and shoulder. There was an investigation into the crash and several design flaws were found in the plane, but the reason for the crash was that Mance had descended too steeply too fast. A toxicology report would show that he had alcohol in his system at the time of the crash, but those who knew him best insisted that he was not under the influence. Even though the tragic final flight of Paul Mance in the Phoenix was captured on film, out of respect for him, it was not included in the completed film. The tragic accident during the filming of the Iger Sanction. It was the 1970s, and Clint Eastwood had just announced he would be doing his own stunts during the filming of the 1975 action film, The Iger Sanction. It was going to be filmed on location on the north face of the Eiger Mountain in Switzerland, and while the Eiger Mountain wasn't the tallest, it was known for being one of the most treacherous. Many worried that he had bitten off more than he could chew. It turned out they were worried about the wrong person. They should have worried about David Knowles. Knowles was a 27-year-old who had been hired to act as a climbing double and to be a photographer for the production. He was also a mountain climber and had scaled the Eiger in 1970, making him the best climber on the set. Not just that, he had won an award for rescuing a group of stranded climbers. On the second day of filming, Knowles and filmmaker Mike Hoover climbed down the ledge to get some footage of the climbers' point of view of falling rocks. This involved having a crew member drop foam rocks at them while Knowles batted away any that were headed right for the lens. They soon finished taking the shots and were chatting as they wrapped up when a boulder broke away and smashed into them. Hoover fractured his pelvis and was out of action for 10 days, but he was the lucky one. Knowles, who was on the top, had taken the brunt of the hit and died instantly. It was just the second day of filming. Eastwood was ready to pack it all in, but the crew was insistent that they continue. In the famous words from showbiz, the show must go on. John Berneker, fatal fall during the Walking Dead stunt rehearsal. For more than 17 years, there was no stunt-related death on a set in the United States. It was a record that had many stunt people sleep better at night. But that record came to an unexpected stop in 2017 at the set of the popular show The Walking Dead. That day, John Hagen Berneker was on the set filming a fight scene for the 7th episode of Season 8. The 33-year-old was an experienced stuntman, and for close to a decade, he had racked up an impressive list of features in over 90 films and television series like Logan and The Fantastic Four. The fight scene Berneker was going to shoot on July 12, 2017, would end with a 22-foot fall from a balcony to a thick safety pad. But when filming began, Berneker either made a last-second decision to grab and hold on to the railing or lost his footing. Either way, this seemingly small change would lead to fatal consequences. Berneker fell in a totally different direction than they had planned. He landed head-first on the concrete just inches away from where the safety pad had been placed. There was no ambulance or medic present, but Berneker was later airlifted to a trauma hospital and put on a ventilator. He died the following day. The production company Stalwart Films was cited for not having proper fall protection and would have to pay the maximum penalty, which was a little over $12,000. Level 6. Drowning on the Lone Ranger set. Since the age of 15, Michael Bridger had been diving. The Redondo Beach, California native was as at home in water as he was on land. Bridger's love for water followed him into adulthood, and aside from working as a welder, he became an expert in water safety. His big career break came when he got to work alongside mega producer Jerry Bruckheimer on the set of the first movie in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Fast forward to September 21st, 2012, and Bridger was on one of the sets of the big-budget movie The Lone Ranger. An underwater action scene was going to be shot at a later date, and Bridger had been called in to clean a 20-foot water tank ahead of that. Bridger got into his scuba equipment, dived into the tank, and got to cleaning. If anything went wrong, he was counting on the diving buddy he had left outside to help. Bridger did not know that his diving buddy had left. According to reports, Bridger was underwater for 10 minutes before his diving buddy noticed no more bubbles were rising to the surface. Bridger had suffered a heart attack. By the time he was pulled out of the water, he was unconscious. 48-year-old Bridger died right on the scene. The California Occupational Safety and Health Administration opened an investigation into his death and found several instances where the production company, Silver Bullet Productions, a Disney affiliate, had dropped the ball. From having Bridger dive alone without a standby diver to there being no designated dive supervisor, there was also the part where diving personnel were not medically cleared or properly trained in emergency procedures like CPR. The list went on. In the end, they were issued fines totaling more than $60,000. There are few films that acknowledge crew members who pass on in the credits, especially when it happened on set. The Lone Ranger was not one of those. Roy Kinnear's fatal horseback accident on the Return of the Musketeers set. 20 years after The Three Musketeers was filmed, its sequel, The Return of the Musketeers, was released in cinemas. But there was one actor in the sequel who would never let the movie come to light. English actor and comedian Roy Kinnear. On September 19, 1988, Kinnear stood on the film set of The Return of the Musketeers sequel in Spain. He was facing a difficult decision. he had been asked to ride a horse. There were a few problems with that. Kinnear was 54 years old, overweight, out of shape, and had no experience horseback riding. If that wasn't bad enough, director Richard Lester also wanted Kinnear to go at high speeds across a wet bridge. A stunt coordinator said it was not safe, and even Kinnear didn't want to do it, but the director insisted, saying that there was no suitable double and the production schedule was tight. They did consider the wet bridge and decided to cover it in sand, hoping it would give the horse a better grip. By the time they realized they had only made the bridge slicker, it would be too late for Kinnear. Kinnear reluctantly got on the horse, and the two were off. As the cameras rolled, Kinnear sped across the bridge, but the excitement on the set quickly turned to horror when the horse stumbled. Kinnear was thrown off and landed on the ground hard. The impact shattered his pelvis, and he was rushed to the hospital. It was there that they discovered he had also suffered massive internal bleeding. They did what they could, but it was just too much for Kinnear, and the following day he had a heart attack and died. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the film industry. Kinnear's family filed a lawsuit against the director Richard Lester and the production company. The family blamed the director and producers while they pointed fingers at the hospital for not giving Kinnear adequate emergency care. The case finally made it to trial in 1994. On the first day of the trial, several witnesses took to the stand and testified to every terrible decision that Lester and the producers had made, which led to Kinnear's untimely end. In the end, the family received a £650,000 settlement as well as their legal fees. As for director Lester, Kinnear's death marked the end of his career. He retired from directing, returning only once in 1991 to direct a concert film. To date, The Return of the Musketeers remains the last movie he would ever direct. Art Scholl's fatal crash during Top Gun filming. One of the things that made the original Top Gun movie such a classic was the impressive aerial stunts that were captured in the film. It was the pre-CGI era, and behind many of those scenes of planes pulling off incredible aerobatic flying was pilot and flight instructor Art Scholl. Scholl's life changed in the 1960s when he crossed paths with Hollywood stunt pilots Paul Mantz and Frank Tallman. Scholl began doing aerial camera work that was used in commercials, TV shows, and films. So when the creators of Top Gun needed to look for someone to get the extraordinary aerial shots they would need, there was just one name on everyone's lips: Art Scholl. Unfortunately, this decision would spell disaster for the famed stunt pilot. That moment came on September 16, 1985. Scholl took off in his camera-equipped plane. He planned to perform an upside-down film over the Pacific Ocean to capture footage for the movie. It was a move he had done plenty of times without a hitch. He started the spin all right, but then the dreaded words came from his radio, "I have a problem." He repeated the sentence a few seconds later, and these were the last words Scholl would ever say. The U.S. Coast Guard was called in to find Scholl, but after bits of debris were found, they concluded he had lost his life and called off the search. And so Scholl's body was never found. One more chilling layer to Scholl's death is that he had lost his life after doing a flat spin, just like Goose, a character in the movie.
Talk to me, Goose.
People could only speculate about what had happened to Scholl that day. Some say Scholl was disoriented after the stunt and crashed. Others believed the plane had a mechanical issue, but the real cause of the crash remains a mystery. Level 7. The tragic accident. John Eric Hexum's death on the set of Cover Up. There are many times when playing a game of Russian roulette doesn't go wrong, but the tragic death of John Eric Hexum is not one of them. Hexum was an American actor and model. At 26, he had the looks and charisma and was already appearing in popular magazines. Word on the street was that Hexum was going to be the next big thing in Hollywood. In 1984, he got the lead role in the CBS series Cover Up. Filming had already begun when disaster struck on October 12, 1984. That day, Hexum was at a set depicting a hotel room in the 20th Century Fox Studios, filming the 7th episode of the series. In the scene, Hexum's character was going to load cartridges into a .44 caliber Magnum, so he was given a prop gun and blanks. After a couple of takes, the director put a pause on the filming. As cast and crew waited, Hexum, still holding the prop gun, decided to lighten the mood. He unloaded every chamber of the gun, all that is, except one. Then he held the gun directly to his head and jokingly said, "Can you believe this crap?" before pulling the trigger. What Hexum didn't know was that prop guns could be dangerous even though they didn't have bullets, because they could still do a lot of damage. Unfortunately for Hexum, he ended up firing a chamber with a blank. Even though it didn't strike his head, the impact of the blast fractured his skull, and a tiny bone fragment dove into his brain. Hexum was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, and for 5 long hours, doctors worked to stop the bleeding in his brain. Hexum never regained consciousness, and 6 days after the accident, he was declared brain dead. Yet, even in death, Hexum would continue to live on through the many lives he touched. Literally. Hexum's mother gave her permission for his viable organs to be donated. Hexum's heart, kidneys, corneas, and even his skin were used to treat several people in desperate need of it, including a grandma who had been on the wait list for a kidney for 8 years. Even though Hexum's death was ruled accidental, the producers of Cover Up and 20th Century Fox would later reach an out-of-court, closed-door settlement with Hexum's family. Roar, one of the most dangerous films ever made. There is no list of dangerous movie productions that can ever be complete without the mention of the 1981 movie Roar. It was a film written, produced, and directed by Noel Marshall along with his wife, Tippi Hedren. They were inspired to make the film in 1969 after a visit to Mozambique, where they saw a group of lions had escaped packers by taking over an abandoned house. They decided to make a film about lions losing their natural habitat. When the duo got back to the US, they started rounding up the lions, rejects from zoos, circuses, and owners who couldn't keep up with them. The first group of lions lived in their suburban home, eating, sleeping right alongside the family. As you can guess, neighbors were not pleased about their new, toothy neighbors, and the family bought a secluded ranch and moved there with their lions. With time, they started acquiring other felines like cougars, jaguars, and tigers. By the time they were ready to film, the family had one of the largest private collections of big cats in the world. The film took 11 years to make and captured lions interacting with humans, sometimes lovingly, but mostly violently. Producer, director, and actor Noel Marshall was bitten by lions multiple times and nearly lost his leg after he was hospitalized for gangrene. His wife Tippi got her head bitten by a lion and had to get 38 stitches. She also fractured an ankle and got gangrene after an elephant picked her up by the trunk. Her daughter Meredith almost got mauled by a lion and had to get 50 stitches. Meanwhile, Noel's son John had a lion jump on him and bite into the back of his head. It took 6 men to pry the lion off him, and he had to get 56 stitches. The crew was not left out of the fun. Cinematographer Jean de Bonk got scalped and had to have a whopping 220 stitches. Doran Cowper, the assistant director, was bitten in the throat and jaw. Yet, these are just a handful. In total, there were over 70 documented attacks by the animals, but Marshall believes that the real number is well over 100. Many of them made it to the big screen. Animal attacks weren't all that plagued by the film. In 1978, a flood destroyed the set, and another time there was a wildfire. Then there was the time many of the big cats fell ill from a virus. By the time they were done filming, the movie had cost $17 million, but grossed just $2 million worldwide. However, in the years following its release, the film has gathered something of a cult following. If you made it this far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give me a follow so you don't miss my next disturbing Iceberg video.